Here we are in the back cabin looking under the flooring. A very important area for your drivetrain to look after, keep an eye on. Periodically, I recommend anybody picking this floor up and checking to make sure everything's right. What we're looking at right here is a new universal coupling, universal joint that we're trying for the first time. Most of the time we have solid face couplings on here. So we're trying this out to see what it is. Notice the blue tape that I have both sides. That's to keep checking as to whether the shafts are moving one direction or the other, either trying to pull out or push in. Especially the stern one, there's a little lip left here where you can feel how much where the shaft is. But over time, in these keyways, this lockdown nut on it may allow it to slide one way or the other. My major concern is that hard astern, the shaft wants to go out the back end. And if that occurs, you may get separation of your coupling here. Going ahead, the reverse can be true. This shaft could try to work itself into this gap and eventually touch this center point, which could cause a problem. Notice on here as well, you've got a nipple that, not too frequently, but there should be some grease done in there. It's basically used for higher application. The small amount of use that it's probably going to get, I don't think you'd need much grease in that joint. Make sure that the wires are tying down so these can't release. Now, there's also this black hose here. That black hose actually continues right down the shaft area here and goes into a shut-off valve at that 90 degrees, and you have it feeding into the stern tube. That's actually a water feed from the engine, because the cutlass bearing in the stern tube is not exposed to outside water. The engine has to force feed water to the stern and keep the coupling nice flow of water on it. So keep a careful eye on. The most susceptible part of that, I would think, is that clear looking hose that you're seeing there, and that's a small joiner hose. There's a replacement hose on board for it, but make sure that that's not going to have a problem. There's the packing gland. We had that redone and a fancy tool made for it. So in order to put your packing in, spin that big nut off, put your new packing material in and close it back up. In order to do that, here's this fancy little custom wrench we had made for it. It has two eyes on it, and they go into the face of that coupling and allow you to slowly tighten it up. There is a nice hole cut in it, by the way, drilled in it. I'd advise putting some line on there so you don't end up with this mechanism down in the bilge. This is the other part of the stern tube. What in the world do we have this for? Well, that wrench I just showed you doesn't spin it. The coupling down here doesn't spin it quite far enough to be able to get into the next set of holes. So in the top part of this coupling, there's a series of holes as well, and this goes in there so you can hit on the end and just nudge it over a tiny bit more so you can get the big wrench onto the face and continue tightening it up. So you have to use both the big wrench and this little tool here to be able to tighten and loosen your packing gland. Out in the center area, we have a little bulkhead here, and on either side of it is your pillow block bearings. They both have nipples on them, by the way, so that you can put occasionally a little squirt of grease down into them. These are designed to keep the shaft as steady as possible. And then in front, this is actually one of the bearings itself that's attached on the shaft as a preventative. Notice the small gap here? That gap is as far as the shaft can wander backwards before it runs into this as a safeguard that the shaft can't walk itself all the way out to the stern, which actually wouldn't happen because the propeller would eventually run into the rudder itself. But it might move back far enough to cause separation of your other coupling. When you winterize the engine, the pink stuff or the green antifreeze that you're using will actually be fed down this line and go down into the packing gland area and come out through the cutlass bearing in the stern tube. So anytime that you do winterize the engine, make sure checking outside that not only did the exhaust have its flow of pink or green liquid, but that the cutlass bearing itself was being fed properly. That means this line, this black line, is properly winterized from the engine. Here we're looking at the quadrant in the back cabin going through to the rudder. You've got 3 of these shivs here where the cable's running through. You have to carefully make sure that the pressure hasn't caused these to bend in one direction trying to go through the bulkhead. On this particular one, you can see we've added a very large backing plate there to help prevent that problem. The cable comes onto the quadrant, but the cable can only be adjusted by one side. This side over here is fixed. This side here, you have the nut and bolt where you can do your adjustment to get the cable a little tighter if you need it. This affair that you see sitting on here is actually the emergency tiller. Should your cable bust, you can always put this onto that square head and put this tiller arm, 1 bolt's only needed, put it down in there and you can steer manually by tiller.